Hello and welcome to the Rich Robinson Show. I'm your host, Rich Robinson. Over the past 25 years, I've been an entrepreneur, investor, advisor, and professor here in Asia. After nearly a quarter of a century in China, I'm now based here in Bali, Indonesia, the island of the gods. Asia is my home now. 60% of the world's population also lives here, but I would contend 80% of the world's dynamism and opportunity is right here in the region. On the show, you'll hear candid and fun conversations with some of my friends and colleagues, people I've met along my journey, entrepreneurs, operators, experts that will help you unlock actionable insights around the Asia region and the entrepreneurial agility that actually defines it. This first season, season 1 of The Rich Robinson Show, is titled At the Speed of China. Like, wait for it, at the speed of light. Things happen fast in China, and in this season 1, we're gonna take a deeper look at that. The rapid economic development over the past few decades, as well as the speed and cycles of innovation taking place all day, every day, right now. Let's go. Jiao! And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Kaboom Town. This guy, I've known him almost a quarter of a century, and I am so grateful that he's taken the time in his incredibly busy schedule. Please welcome to the pod, Chris Reitermann, everybody. Yeah, I want you to applaud. Like I said before, I don't care if you're on the toilet somewhere, driving your car, if it's dangerous. This is amazing. Like, we were just chatting before, and his signature modesty and humor and honesty. But I met Chris way back, just around the Dotcom Bust time, about 25 years ago, and he has just had this incredible trajectory. You know, I'm calling it the alpha of the advertising industry. He's just running the show, which I think is for sure the best agency across the region, one of the best in the world. And it's absolutely amazing. So thanks for coming on, Chris.
Thanks, Rich. What an amazing introduction. I hope I can live up to that. Yeah, we've known each other for a very long time. It was actually, when you reached out to me, I was actually thinking you're probably one of the first Laowai I met when I came to Beijing. So, you're literally one of the very first guys I ran into in some dodgy bar in Beijing 25 years ago. And, I looked at all the people that you had on your show so far. I know pretty much all of them, many of them personally quite well. So, obviously we've done very different things, but we've probably gone a very similar kind of route through life and met a lot of very similar people. And, we probably both had a blast doing what we did. And, enjoy the sun in Bali. And I'm still here, grinding it every day.
Grinding it from the mothership in China. But you have this beautiful place in Thailand that I know for like the last couple of decades. So you have your sort of escape route. But, it's interesting. At every pod, I ask people, who should I bring on next? Who should I bring on next? And your name was number one across that. People are like, oh, my God, you want to talk to somebody who's been at the front row eating popcorn, watching the show and participating in the show, watching stuff happen real time, you got to bring on Chris Reitermann. And here you finally are. So it's great. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you. And man, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story, your origin story and your path to China and your journey at Ogilvy, WPP.
Like most of us probably go some kind of similar path, which starts kind of being lost in life or something, or not exactly knowing what to do. All I knew very early on, I like advertising. I actually knew that before I even graduated from high school. And I knew that Germany is probably not the place I want to spend my life.
Can I interrupt you there? You knew you loved advertising in high school. I've never heard that before. Tell me about that. Tell me like where that came from. And I love advertising too, even though people criticize it. I love the creativity and, business side.
Actually, it's a funny story. In the US, you have this, you do kind of yearbooks every year, right? With like kind of pictures of everybody And in Germany, you don't do that. And one day we decided we're going to do like a yearbook. And somehow I got the job. And then I had to find like advertisers to sponsor that thing and help us print it and do all that kind of stuff. And that was probably when I was like 16 or something. And a friend of mine, his parents had an ad agency that helped us. At that time, you didn't have computers. So it was like, the whole print setting and all that kind of stuff was a bit complicated. But I really loved that process and spent quite a lot of time in my friend's parents' agency. It was like a tiny little agency. And felt like, oh, that's cool. I want to do more of that. And then tried to become a German copywriter until I realized that's not going to travel very far. German copywriting is not too much in demand in the rest of the world. So that kind of got me into it. And then, I went to school, university, and ended up by sheer luck doing a thing called East Asian Business Management, which was like in 1991. And as part of that, you had to pick either Japanese, Korean, or Chinese. And my grades were pretty bad. So the only thing that they let me in was the Chinese one, because at that time, China wasn't popular at all. I think they had like 40 spots and 27 people applied or something. So everybody got in. That was it. And I had to study in China. Did that when I was a Tongji in 92, I think, studying Chinese. But then, went back to Germany and thought like, probably I don't have to like really start my career in China. So I found myself a job in London, and then that was at Ogilvy already. And then by sheer luck, my big boss at that time got transferred to become the head of Ogilvy in Asia. So my predecessor, and he said like, hey, don't you know some Chinese? He said, yeah. And then he said like, come along. So I joined him to Hong Kong, and very funny. I was then probably one of the first foreigners ever that got his work visa rejected in Hong Kong because they said, I have no skills of any value to Hong Kong. I just found the letter a couple of weeks ago. Quite funny. It was, at that time,
you should post that. It's like Jack Ma getting rejected from KFC. You got to post that.
I think I did. So they rejected my work visa, and then they didn't really know what to do with me. And then they said like, hey, why don't you go to Taiwan? Because, being in Hong Kong, not having a job, not having any money is a pretty expensive undertaking when you're like 25. So then Ogilvy to Taiwan. And there was that time TB Shannon running things, and they kindly gave me a home in Taiwan. And then I started pretty much my career in Ogilvy in Taiwan. Stayed there for 4 years and then moved to Beijing, and that's it.
Fantastic trajectory. Wow, because in some ways Taiwan was ideal because you're using Mandarin. It's already way more, it's not as advanced as Hong Kong maybe in advertising. I don't know, but maybe equal, but way more advanced in the mainland. So by the time you got to Beijing, you were already like, that now you have a lot of expertise, language and, advertising. And then you brought it to.
Actually, Taiwan at that time, kind of in the 90s, Taiwan was like one of the most sophisticated and successful creative places in Asia. And Ogilvy, Taiwan at that time was probably one of the top one or two largest markets for us in the whole of Asia. It was huge.
Fantastic. How many Lao Wai in that office?
One.
That's so great.
That was actually something, when I showed up there, I mean, I knew like a few words or something, but there was no foreigner for quite a while, and everything that happened in Chinese. So I had like no idea what's going on. And, that probably encouraged me to study Chinese a bit harder and know what's going on. I remember like in the beginning, they had like always these announcements over the loudspeaker, and I had no idea what they were saying. And then 20 minutes later, nobody was there anymore, and I was still sitting at my desk because it was like a fire alarm or company meeting or whatever. And in the end, I think we had like one or two other foreigners, but it was very local, very local.
That's great. And then you showed up in Beijing. I want to say like, was it 2000, 2001?
Yeah, actually like January 2000 or December 99, something like
Oh,
that.
January 2000. Okay, so 2000.
So
Because I remember it was like when I met you, it was just the dot-com bust right around that time, I believe. And I think that you were focusing initially on digital, like specific, like Ogilvy back
Ogilvy
then. Is that
Interactive.
right? Ogilvy Interactive.
Nothing in my life seems to happen the way it's supposed to happen. I worked in advertising in Taiwan, and then when I moved to China, they gave me a job on, I think I was supposed to work on IBM, which at that time was our biggest and only client, more or less, in Beijing. And then that didn't quite work out. And then they said like, oh, we have this new thing called Ogilvy Interactive. Why don't you try that one? And at that time, I had like two or three bosses above me, and somehow within like 2 weeks, they all left. And then I literally kind of got promoted three times in 2 weeks or something because nobody was there anymore.
But you were forged by fire, right? Because there was like very little budget, and you're like, okay, you're in control, you're running the show, but like you got to be an entrepreneur. You really were like scrappy, I think.
At that time, we had like, let's call it visionary leader, in some ways, maybe a bit crazy, but he knew that the internet's going to be big.
And what's his name?
Larry Rinaldi. I must say he's the one that kind of took us into a space that nobody really knew what it was. He maybe did it a bit too extreme because he basically told everybody like, advertising is the end of it. Forget about everything. It's all the internet. Let's put all our chips on the internet. The only problem was there were like kind of 2 million internet users at that time. So not that much money to be made yet. So we maybe made the shift a bit too fast. I remember we had in the early days 400 people doing digital, but there was no digital to be done because there was no internet. So I remember us doing CD-ROMs. That was kind of like a thing for a while.
Yes.
So we took like company brochures and put them on a CD-ROM, and then put some funny interface to it, and everybody thought like, woohoo, that's crazy. We got like paid like 100 grand to do a CD-ROM or something like that. And then we started building the first websites. Same thing, it's like a 20-page kind of brochure, and we got paid like $500,000 to do it. Now you would probably get $50 to do it.
Right.
But we're just figuring things out and helping clients to kind of master the internet somehow. And we did some serious stuff, obviously. We did some pretty big stuff for IBM, helped them to build kind of all their digital presence in China at that time. And it was a lot of fun. And we had like a dodgy office to start with. It was the number one
I've been
carpet
there.
factory in the middle of nowhere. And within the number one carpet factory, there was an even shittier room called Room 401. That was where the internet guys were, and locked away in that room doing stuff. But it was a lot of fun because we had no idea what we were doing, and we're just trying to figure things out together with our clients. It was good.
So I remember two things. Number one, when I met you, I was like, wow, your Chinese was already good. And I was like, this guy is coming in the digital interactive space. Wow, he's really, you know, qualified to do something because there was no other agencies. It was kind of like Forrest Gump when all the boats got destroyed and then they became like the dominant shrimper. I think most countries around the world, it wasn't large agencies that dominated interactive. It was like a lot of the independent agencies, but you guys were really dominant in the digital agency space. I partially, Larry's vision and then you just like grabbing everything, right? And I think that was like a blessing in disguise in a way. I think in the big people are like, oh, take this over, and you're like, oh my God, there's no budget, there's nothing going on here. But then it seemed like every quarter it was like growth, 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 and compounding.
Yeah, it wasn't just me. We had a lot of crazy
Of course,
guys, and some
sure.
of them still
Dirk.
pop up in place. Yeah, Dirk, he's traveling the world right now. But actually, Dirk and I were like old friends from university, and
Yeah.
he knew how to design some websites or something, which at that time was totally enough to get a very good job. So, we didn't have anyone in China who knew how to do it. So I called him, say, hey, Dirk, come and help out. And then he did come, and 25 years later, he's still there. And Björn's the
Right.
bell. I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
Björn. He was
Bjorn.
TO
Of
at that
course.
time, also
Yeah.
some crazy guy. So we had quite a few of those.
Then Bjorn's career, App Annie and all the other stuff that he did. Yeah, I mean, it was a really great crew that you had there. Yeah, amazing. And then share from there, like what the path of your career trajectory looked like after that, and like some of the new challenges you took on.
Yeah, so I came to China in Ogilvy, and now it's 25 years later. I'm still there. So quite unusual in our industry.
Right?
It doesn't and never did feel like I'm repeating things. And I think
No, of
that's
course, yeah.
why I'm still doing what I'm doing. And it's an industry that I love, and it's a company that I love too. I mean, Ogilvy is a great agency with a great culture. And I think we've been, obviously not doing everything right, but we've done a lot of things right over the years. And it's an agency with a great culture, I think also open to innovation and failure. I can't remember how many joint ventures or startups or whatever we had over the years that all didn't work out, or most of them didn't work out. I'm still here and I still have my job. So Ogilvy was always nice enough to let me try things, explore new ventures and new directions. And often they didn't work out in some form, but they did work out in another, maybe got us into like a new offer, new service, stuff like that. And, obviously over the last 25 years, our business changed massively, or China as a market got a lot more mature. And I was quite lucky that I had various different jobs over the years, and some of them were fully focused on China. Some of them were more regional. And it was always kind of interesting because whenever I had a regional role, I was still based in China. I was still living in China, but I was not spending every day of my life focusing on China, which I think was quite good because it kind of showed me what's going on in the rest of the world, and gave me the ability to bring some of the learnings from China to other places and the other way around. So that was quite interesting. And also try to never be kind of like a China hand only, which I think keeps you sane. So it was a great journey, and I spent first 9 years in Beijing, kind of leading up to the Olympics, which was kind of like a big blast, crazy experience.
Share an Olympic anecdote, something about that 08, 08, 08, kind of China coming out to the world. You gotta have a fun story with around the games or with a client.
Yeah, I was actually listening to Scott Cronick's episode, and he already talked about it a lot. I think it was, crazy for all of us because it was probably 5 years where Beijing was the buzz of the world, and everybody came, and lots of foreigners showed up. Lots of companies had major, initiatives. For me personally, I think the most fun anecdote was Johnson and Johnson. Actually, they sponsored the Olympics one time and one time only, and that was in Beijing, because at that time CEO decided that that's really the big kind of coming out party in China to show the world what a great business they are and what they have in China. They're a huge business in China. So there was a massive pitch for their Olympic sponsorship, and we went there and we walked in. I think it was on Easter Sunday or something like that,
Wow.
probably 2007. And we walked in, we presented, and there were like, literally 10 agencies presenting. And we presented, and they basically said, that's it. No deliberation, no, nothing. They all fell in love with what we presented. It was actually a line, okay, which still until today we're trying to find the right English translation. It was a Chinese line that we came up with, and they loved it. And they said like, okay, you won. Everybody else can go home. Business is yours. And then we partnered with Johnson Johnson to help them do all their Olympic campaign, Olympic activation, which literally was just for China. So they were a global sponsor,
Wow.
but they really didn't care too much about the rest of the world. They really wanted to do it for China. So that was really interesting, a lot of fun, worked with great people, a guy called Brian Perkins, who is a great guy. Still, even I haven't seen him in 20 years, but great people
That's
at the
great.
Johnson Johnson side. And then for like a year and a half, we did all their work around the Olympics. It's fun.
Amazing. That's decisive. I love it. Like that's Mad Men kind of stuff. It's like, oh, yes. That copywriting, like that's the power of what you do. I remember there's one scene in Mad Men where a junior guy takes out a pencil and he starts to like make notes on the copy, and the senior guy like says like, no, stop that. stop that, right? It's like this one line has
In
taken,
this case, I could tell you the real story. It was, I think, the night before, and we didn't have a bloody line. So we
wow.
told everybody in the agency, you're writing lines now. So everybody wrote lines, and then we had 100 lines or something, and then we kind of narrowed it down to three, four, five. And it was actually a line written by a copywriter from Taiwan who
Wow.
wrote it. And in the end,
Beautiful.
I think we went in with 2 lines or something, but it was literally no major strategy behind it. It was just okay, let's get as many lines as we can because we only have 24 hours left. And then this guy came up with a line. They loved it. And that became the line for the Olympic campaign.
But that's a great strategy, right? Get the hive mind involved, bring everybody, no matter how, junior, senior they are, and then, really try to grab them because you've got 10 of them. You can only, how much can they remember, right? And they can remember that line and it worked. That's excellent. And you know what? My inbox is polluted with your awards all the time. I see in LinkedIn, Ogilvy just crushes it in the award category. So that wasn't an anomaly. That was definitely something that you've replicated again and again over the decades, which is, pretty damn impressive in this crazy competitive market. So let's talk a little bit about this crazy competitive market these last 20 minutes. I'd love to hear a story or anecdote of first of all, if you're in the advertising industry, you're already at a ridiculous clock speed. Like the agency life is much closer to startup or some sort of crazy investment banking, hours and pace and intensity than just about anything else, right? So you're already at a different clock speed. And then you place that in the China environment where things just, objectively go faster. And I'd love to hear, if you're able to, because it's like that old thing. I've said this before. There's an old fish and two young fish. Good morning, sir. Good morning, boys. How's the water, boys? Excellent, sir. And then he swims away and they're like, what's water? So you're literally surrounded in water. Speed is one of your key competitive advantages and something that are immersed in. But I'd love to hear a story of how things maybe are different in China and how you've taken that to.
China is obviously a very particular market, but I also think it's often a market where people come up with things like China speed, for example, which often is to me something they use for let's do a not so great job.
Sure.
Yes, China obviously, operates at a crazy pace, but I think often that mentality is not necessarily the best for quality and doing great stuff. It's yes, for you get things done, you get them done fast, you fail, change. But, in our business, we sometimes also like to do things well. And sometimes to do things well takes a bit of time. And that is still something that I'm often fighting with clients and say in 2 days, you cannot do a great job. I'm sorry. But obviously we're used to operate at a different pace than we do in many other markets. And that's good because you get to do much more, and just the sheer volume of work that you do and get done in a place like China is crazy compared to other places. When I often see for example, how many pitches we do in a year in China. I don't know, 200 or 300 or 400. In Korea, we do two.
Wow.
Because obviously it's a much smaller market for us, but things there just move at a much slower pace than in China. And people may be sometimes a bit less strategic in how they think about things, but okay, I need this today, get it done, and then you do it. It's actually quite funny. A couple of years ago, we had a lot of local Chinese clients that went out of China. So we set up a China outbound office, one in New York, one in Berlin, and I sent some people from our China office to Berlin, and they couldn't believe how slow things move in Germany. And we were working with Chinese clients in Germany. So they were like, okay, I want this now and I need it tomorrow. And our people in our Berlin office were like, oh, I am, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I need to pick up my kids from kindergarten and then I go to yoga class, come back tomorrow. So China operates definitely at a different pace. And I think it's, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But we obviously learn a lot on how to operate in this environment. But I also must say that, clients, and we work now with a lot of Chinese clients, right? We used to, when we first came into China, we were 100% multinational companies. Now it's 50% local. And often what we do for them, I think, is much more interesting for us because, we help them create something from nothing. And we kind of run the show from here, which is a lot more responsibility, a lot more strategic work. And I must say that, a lot of the big Chinese companies are getting very mature in how they operate and how they do marketing, and increasingly look outside of China in how they do things. So they have no choice but to kind of somehow apply global standards and how they work. Bring some of the good things that made them successful in China to other places, but then also learn how to operate in different cultures, different markets, which is extremely interesting for us to partner with our clients on that journey.
That's great. Yeah. And obviously, with all those awards, I mean, there's some things that just haven't changed in 70 years in advertising, which is, the clear messaging and having the amazing creative and doing the distribution in a measured, intelligent way. And I think as a service business, you have to kind of make adjustments with digital and maybe now AI and other things. But maybe some examples from your clients, some of the things that you've seen about how they're doing stuff on the product side or FMCG side that's at a faster pace that's maybe helping them to, because certainly there's downsides to speed, and sometimes it's better to go slow to go fast, but maybe some of these clients that you're working with, or maybe some multinationals that have adjusted to be able to compete in China better. Any anecdotes there?
Now, pretty much every multinational that operates in China is talking about China for China, China speed, because I think they have realized that doing things the way they do outside of China is not going to make them successful here. So there must be something right about China speed, because it made many Chinese companies extremely successful. And if you have China speed on one side of the spectrum, you have, global standards and all this kind of stuff, R&D processes on the other. There's probably a good thing in both, but Chinese companies are getting more mature in how they do that. Multinationals have to adapt to how they operate in China. And the ones that get that blend right, they're usually successful. And we work with a lot of automotive companies in China. So it's actually our biggest category. And, that's insane what's been going on there in the last few years, and how much the local EV players have, stirred up the market, became extremely successful, and really changed the entire industry. And you look at all the multinational traditional car companies in China, and many of them, have been extremely successful in China, selling millions of cars. They now have no choice but to adapt to China's speed. And you look at Chinese EV companies to kind of launch a new platform takes them 12 to 18 months. Multinationals used to take them 5 years to come up with a new model or new car platform. So you cannot be successful operating like that in a place like China. So now all of them are kind of talking about China for China strategies, and there's, many different ways of doing that, but you have to adapt. Otherwise, you won't be successful in this place. But I must also say, over the years, there have been many, many instances where Chinese companies popped up somewhere, and then people said like, oh, they're going to destroy Coca-Cola, or they're going to destroy Vidal, or they're going to destroy whatever other multinational companies. Those companies, many of them haven't survived, or they've been kind of one-hit wonders. And so I do think, there's a lot of good things that multinational companies can bring into China, global processes, e-processes, product development, go-to-market, all this kind of stuff. But you have to adapt it to kind of a China environment. And at the same time, like I said to you before, there's a lot of Chinese companies, they come to us because they want to become more international in the way they operate. And when we work with those Chinese companies, it's not just we're doing ads for them. Actually, that's, a tiny part of what we do. A lot of it is to help them set up global marketing practices, operating procedures, budgeting processes, structure. I mean, they literally come to us and say, oh, help me set up a marketing department, or help me set up a global marketing organization. That's often not just done by us alone, but we work sometimes with, companies like McKinsey, Accenture, whatever, Deloitte. But these are, very interesting, jobs we have with them. I also think that because we were talking about what we do as an agency, I think many people still haven't quite understood how much our business has evolved over the years, because doing
Yeah,
ads
tell us a
and
little bit about
TV
that.
commercials, our business has become extremely technology driven, right? So a lot of what we do now is working with some of the big kind of marketing platforms, Salesforce, Adobe, stuff like that. In China, a little bit less so, but globally, we have a huge setup in India doing Salesforce operation, Adobe, marketing cloud operation, stuff like that. We're helping our clients a lot, figuring out data, how to work, how to build first party data. And so it's a very different business. We're not just doing ads and TV commercials anymore. That's actually a small part of our business.
Okay, yeah.
And given all the possibilities you have now with technology, we're doing, I think things get a lot more personalized and obviously very digital driven. And, you look at China, 90% of media spending is digital. So there is basically no more analog or traditional advertising. That's more or less gone. And everything we do now is digital, social, is absolutely massive. Everything we do is driving to commerce. So our business is very different than what it was 20 years ago. And I think much, much less madman-y than it used to be. And the sheer volume of what we do now is just crazy in comparison to 20 years ago, just because you can through technology. 20 years ago, we did one TV commercial and a few print ads for a client a year. Now we do, 10,000 pieces of content and a lot of them technology driven, AI supported. So it's become pretty technical what we do. Obviously, creativity is still absolutely crucial to what we do. And that's really the only thing that differentiates us from every other company. Be a company that clients should come to when they want, a different take on things, and they want creativity to get them to be somewhere where they're not at the moment. So that's still extremely important. And, in China, I think at the moment we're maybe in a phase where creativity is maybe not as appreciated as it should be, simply because, you can do so many things for so little money. And like we talked about before, China speak, you do it, it doesn't work, you do something else. But, all this gazillion tons of content that companies produce at the moment, they still need to make sense and ladder up to something. And as you know, as I know, good content is something that people will engage with more than bad content. And you get so much stuff every single day. How do you stand out as a company or brand from this massive amount of content that's out there and the 0.001 second attention span that people have today? I mean, if you have anything that's not grabbing you in a second, you're gone, right? So that's still very important for us, and where we try to make a difference by doing things more creatively than others.
Fantastic. Love it. And share just one final thought about AI and how that's impacting and going to impact what you're working on and how you're leveraging it.
And it will make a huge difference to our industry and many industries, I guess. It's still very early days, but I can see it already now. There's several areas where it makes a huge difference. On strategy, for example, we use AI, for research, for example, we use AI for consumer insights, where we can just get data at a fingertip that took us weeks and weeks of work before. And same when it comes to production, for example, we can do a lot of stuff now with AI, to use massive amounts of content, develop new content, different content. So it will drive, I think, a lot of efficiency in our business. So I think a lot of the kind of lower level tasks, I think, will be automated and will be AI driven, which I think is good for us because, we spend so much time on pretty basic tasks at the moment, which, in the future we don't. So hopefully we can repurpose some of those resources that we don't need anymore to do that, to do much more value added tasks. And I think that's, to me, where the world is going with AI, that a lot of the basic tasks will be automated, will be AI driven, and then you still need to add value on top of it. I mean, ChatGPT, Midjourney, whatever other AI tools you use is not going to give you a final answer. You still need to craft it. You still need to analyze it, interpret, and then you get to a better result. So I think our business probably will change to that we use AI to give us a lot of the basics, and then we add value on top of it, and that should drive creativity and better outcome. So I'm not worried about it. I'm excited about it.
Excited indeed. That's great. Excellent. Chris, really, really appreciate it. Amazing journey. I love it. Looking forward to even more adventures from your side. And excellent to catch up, and hope to see you when I'm next.
Come and say hi. Thanks so much for having me. Enjoy the sun. And I'm going to work. You're going to the beach.
To the jungles for a hike. I like to ruck, heavy backpack.
I'm going to the jungle of the WPP campus in Shanghai now.
That urban jungle, indeed. Yeah. Watch out. All right, man. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
That's a wrap. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Rich Robinson Show, Season 1 at the Speed of China. Visit therichrobinson.com/show to smash that subscribe button. Please also go to iTunes or whatever platform of choice, rate and comment. And until next time, thank you very much. 再见. 谢谢.